I'm finally done making this song. Let's hear how it sounds. Mixing is not that hard. We should understand that music is basically just shoving a bunch of sounds together to the point that it sounds good. Main problem is, placing a bunch of sounds together is not that black and white. As the more layers you add, the more likely the entire track would just turn to mush and just sound really awful. This is where mixing becomes super crucial, because its main purpose is to blend together all the sounds you have so that it begins to sound good. Though, the more of these sounds you shove into your playlist, the harder it is to mix them effectively. Or is it? Honestly, there are only two things you need in mixing. It's basically the effects of an EQ and a compressor. Yes, it is an oversimplification, but not many people understand how much they impact the mix. Let me show you. So, with this example I have, it's pretty obvious that the drums doesn't cut through the mix enough. So this is where compression helps. Basically, I'm gonna sidechain the drums using the compression in Fruity Limiter, and then I'm gonna put that to the rest of the instruments and bring the level down just enough so that the drums punch through the mix. See how much of an impact it does? Big mistake most beginner producers do is just completely max out the volume of the drums so that it cuts through the mix. But usually that's how most of your songs end up real mushy. Okay, now that we're done with the drums, let's now go to the instrumentals. So as you can hear, it sounds good on its own, but there are some frequencies I want to filter out. Filtering just basically means removing a certain frequency band, which is one of the main things to consider to combat muddy mixes. In this case, the background piano and lead are subtly clashing together because of the frequencies from the right part of it. So I'll use a high cut filter so that the piano doesn't interfere with the lead. So the final mix should sound a little bit like this. So it sounds really nice. So let's try actually using these techniques in a more complex song I made, months ago. Let's listen to it. Oh yeah, by the way, the reason why it sounds much better is actually just because I turned off all my previous effects and just removed the ones I made. I'm sorry. Okay, bullcrapping aside, one thing I haven't pointed out is that mixing is basically just volume balancing. It accounts for roughly 80% of the process, and the rest of the other crap like EQ and compression only takes about 20%, which makes it the most time extensive. Now, there isn't a one best way for mixing, as it is something you'll improve on over time, but there are some tips to make mixing easier, which I've learned during my music production journey 2 years ago. So first is a good composition means less mixing. Generally speaking, a good composition already has most of the instruments sorted out in a way that works well together, so you won't really need a lot of mixing, maybe just a few volume tweaks here and there. To be honest, you should invest more time in making the song, because a good song but a bad mix is way better than a bad song but a good mix. At least with a bad mix, you can watch videos like these to fix it, but a bad song? Well, maybe you should just quit music already. Number 2. Mix on lower output volume. Mixing at a lower master volume just lessens ear fatigue and makes it easier to find instruments or sounds that are overpowering the entire mix. This is partly the reason why I don't recommend cranking the volume of some instruments, like the drums for example, to max just to cut through the mix, as when you lower the volume of the entire master, usually it's the only thing you hear. Most likely, people who are going to listen to your music won't set the volume to max. So, in instances where they do lessen the volume from their phone or their TV or their car, all they're gonna hear is that maxed out drums, which is a disservice to the other instruments. Number 3, mix on a separate day. The process of music, which I like to call the 3 M's, requires separate days for each part. In my personal experience, cramming the process all together is just stupid. As when I hear the final song the next day, I usually just laugh at how terrible it sounds. Ear fatigue really does fuel delusional masterpieces, so please take a freaking break every once in a while. Number 4, gain stage and pan before mixing. In my personal experience, gain staging, or tweaking the volume of each instrument, and panning, which is setting the output either to the left or the right speaker, makes it a heck of a lot easier to mix afterwards, as most of the heavy lifting is done during this stage. The only thing I have to worry about is if I introduce other effects or the sound doesn't fit the song because of bad recording or just the instrument in general. Number 5, use reference tracks related to the song you're working on. As far as I know, most starting producers don't use this. It's literally a cheat code since the songs you'll use as a reference are already mixed and mastered by professional sound engineers. There might be some instruments in the song that sound way different than yours despite it being the same genre or feel. And this can be a great starting point to use an EQ or other techniques to try and replicate similar to the reference track. And lastly, and probably the most important tip you'll ever receive from this video, is to just enjoy the process. Stop overthinking and stop overworking yourself with mixing. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this helps even a little bit in mixing, as honestly, it's